one thing that I stress about the course is that it's not about just copying every technique and trying to replicate everything. I think it's about really noticing the things that you find could be helpful. Like, even if you just get one technique or one sort of thing from the course, I think it's valuable. That's always been my approach. And you take that nugget and you inject it into your own workflow or your own approach. And it becomes, something valuable that you retain. It becomes really about your own output and not so much about, having the tutorial represent you, right?
How much do you need to learn to master something? This is what we discuss in today's episode with designer and director KRIS Brady, who is also our newest instructor teaching Mastering Film UI, which is available now. KRIS is incredibly experienced, with a career based in curiosity and passion that has spanned over 2 decades, and has seen him nurture his own mastery by working on projects such as Black Panther, Love, Death and Robots, Aquaman, Parallel TCG, and countless others, as well as some amazing personal projects. And KRIS not only shares how his course is incredibly accessible and easy to follow, but also how it will empower you to forge your own identity, wow clients and audiences, and help you flourish as a designer and a creative. Plenty of juicy nuggets from KRIS in this one. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast. I'm delighted to welcome on a very special guest and a brand new Learn Squared instructor, KRIS Brady. Welcome, KRIS.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
So excited to talk with you today, and we'll cover many things, obviously the course as well. But before we get into all the juicy stuff, if you wouldn't mind giving listeners a lowdown as to who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So, as you said, my name's KRIS Brady. I'm a director, designer, visual development artist with about 20 years of experience in the entertainment industry and other facets of design and art as well. Did you want me to kind of step through my career or
totally
give
that'd be great.
Give a little round? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I initially started my design career in sort of the Flash era, the boutique design studio era. So a lot of web microsites, if you remember what those are, were, all the rage back in the day. And the web was really a very creative and really interesting place, honestly, before a lot of sort of standardization, which is now the normal sort of design aesthetic, I suppose. Previous to that, I actually initially went to school to be a 3D animator. So I started out on SGIs and really kind of old school Dells with, using Softimage and 3D Studio Max and a little bit of Lightwave and so on. Maya came out, and that, was a big deal. I took some traditional animation courses as well. So that was really sort of my artistic path initially. And then I fell right into this exciting new thing that was happening, which was the Flash era and animation and web and really an amazing sort of cross section of technology, art, and animation and graphic design. And that sort of was my introduction to a lot of sort of graphic design, essentially, as well, because I'm not a trained graphic designer. I come more from the illustration and animation side of things. I spent quite a few years in the boutique Flash era. And that was sort of my pathway into working in film as well, where I was doing a lot of UI and sort of understanding user behavior, but also understanding how to make something entertainment and how to tell entertainings rather, and how to tell a story, right? So that was sort of my first understanding of how art and motion kind of can be this vehicle for story. And I think that's the thing that really stayed with me. I did a quick stint in tech for a minute. I had the privilege of working with Oculus quite early on, and the VR space was really interesting as well. But ultimately, I wanted to be in entertainment. I think for me that was just the right place. And also, I always wanted to work on shows. I always wanted to work on films and series and such. So really, my pathway into that was through this UI aesthetic, or kind of very small niche sort of area of filmmaking. And there was definitely some standouts already. Obviously, I was aware of G-Monk from way before that, from the Flash days. He was already a really big deal, and his design aesthetic and everything was already very, very solid. So when he came out with the work from Tron, for example, and obviously Oblivion and on, it was such a big deal. And in tandem with that, I also discovered the work of Mark Colleran, who just recently passed, actually, very tragically. But he was very much a pioneer of the like sort of fictional user interface, niche. So I downloaded everything from his website, and he had all these amazing After Effects tutorials and Photoshop files, and he was very generous with his knowledge. And when there was really nothing out there at the time, or very little rather, and a lot of this stuff was being done in like Photoshop and obviously After Effects too, but it was really early days. So yeah, I think my last sort of move, or my big sort of pivot, I think, was on the first, I think it was Thor. Yeah, we did a Thor site, and then we had to do this big campaign for the first Avengers. And although it wasn't on the feature itself, I had to come up with all this UI and all this stuff, and it just felt like it was just like coming out of me, like I couldn't make it fast enough, and I was having such a good time. So it really was like, okay, this is a place that you can really contribute to, and I felt really comfortable there. So all the previous knowledge that I had learned and kind of worked towards, sort of worked its way into this work. So it felt like the right spot. So yeah, after that, I worked on a number of features. The Terminator spot. I worked on a quite a large feature called What Happened to Monday, which was about a year's worth of work, and I did like hundreds of shots, and a number of personal projects along the way. And then I ended up working on lots of Marvel shows. My first real show was Black Panther, and that was such a joy, seeing things on the big screen and really getting to like see things like happening in the theater and see your name in the credits and all that stuff was really fun. And then, you do a few of those and you're like, okay, cool. Like, what's next kind of thing. But it's been a real joy. Like I've worked on a lot of fun IPs and some game stuff along the way. And yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm going on and on here.
No,
But
it's good. It's good.
yeah, and then now I'm about 2.5 years in with a amazing company called Parallel, which are it's a gaming company or a gaming studio, and we're working on a TCG or a trading card game, among other things as well. But that was our sort of our initial gaming product. And I'm part of the art department, or the small art team that are composed of concept artists, illustrators, animators, and just an amazing supportive crew. And yeah, we're just building this IP from the ground up. And so it's been a really exciting run so far, and yeah, there's a lot more to come. Like it's gonna be a big deal. So we're really excited about all the stuff that we're making, and it's just a really supportive group. After a while, when you become a senior, or you become seasoned, after a while it becomes about the people. It becomes about relationships and who you want to work with, and the people that support you and build you up. And obviously you want to grow professionally and technically, but yeah, it becomes about making not friends, but also colleagues that also give you that support, that emotional support as well. Rather than, I don't know if you've been in a toxic workplace before, but it's stress that you don't need. It's no paycheck is worth it, honestly.
Oh, no, for sure. I'm someone where unfortunately, I've had like many different jobs in different industries, and yeah, it's weird. When I used to work in sales, that's probably the way it was most like, say, it had lots of toxicity. It was the same company, but the team, like, there's so much turnover of staff and changing of teams and stuff, and the toxicity levels went super high to like, there's probably I think 6 months of it was like complete harmony, and it was absolute bliss. And I've always like latched onto that moment as like my like way to measure of like whether a team's good or not, because I've also got lots of mention lots of like, I guess, like you mentioned, toxicity as well, plenty of like, I guess, data on that. And there's like, how do you find it like when you are in a space where, because obviously the tasks are the same, they don't really change, right? But there's something about the energy that flows around, whether it's good or bad, that can really impact you. Like, how much of a difference does it make to you when you are with a group of creatives and people and professionals where I guess you could say it's harmony?
Well, I mean, I would say that it's still at times, work, right? It's challenging. There's always going to be times when you're stressed, and there's going to be times when you've been grinding at a project for maybe too long, and it's, you have to find that creative energy, that extra amount to wrap it up, to finish it. But I do think that having a group of professionals that you can reach out to and have them put eyes on your work, or give you usually very constructive criticism, is it's only going to make the work better. So in that case, the harmonious part is sort of taken care of, right? I do think lots of artists, myself, either do or have struggled with this idea, this concept of whether you're good enough or whether you're deserving to be part of what you're working on, and all those kind of things. And the confidence, some of that confidence can be really propped up by people who you respect and admire, giving you sort of this like, hey man, you're doing great, that kind of thing. And so having a positive work environment, I think, is paramount for good work. And just generally healthy, to be something you want to contribute to too, right? It puts you in that mindset of like being the same and like you want to be that person. So I think it's a big deal.
And like equally, when things that say, let's call it toxic or negative, sometimes that can be deliberate. Sometimes it just happens as a result of whatever's at play. And let's say every party doesn't intend it to be that way, but it can end up that way. But like from like great you mentioned there as well, like it's something that you want to contribute to and be part of as well. We also have with our listeners and a lot of our students that are completely new to the industry, still at the very early stages of their career, trying to figure out things. What would you say is something that you've noticed, particularly in yourself, that you've been able to contribute to a positive environment in a studio or in a professional setup?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I do think it matters to have a positive attitude. And, there's ways to give criticism without putting someone down and stepping on their work. And, it's like the compliment sandwich, kind of thing. But I think being able to look at someone's work and critique it in a way that is both constructive and maybe positive, I think says a lot about you as a artist or designer as well, and how well you understand what you're trying to do, right? It's like if you can explain to your mom or your grandma what it is you do for a living, it's you can't just use all the words and all the terms that you normally would when you're speaking like we are now, right? So it kind of falls into that same place, in my opinion. Like you're able to articulate concepts, you're able to speak truthfully, but also not degrading the work, but trying to be I guess constructive when you're giving feedback. And also about receiving it has a lot to do with it, right? So it's not just giving and being a director and telling people what to do. It's about knowing that you are not perfect, and other people's opinions and criticisms isn't a personal attack. It's about the work. It's about solving the problems. And especially on a show, like you're working for a director's vision, right? It's not your show. You're part of a big group, a collaborative effort, and everyone's contributing and everyone's doing really hard work on their end. And you really have to respect that. So you can't take a personal offense when, something doesn't match or something isn't fitting into the vision, or even like a shot that you worked on for months and you go to sit down in the theater and it never shows up. Like that happened to me on Black Panther,
Right.
Like I had this like amazing shot that I had been really putting a lot of effort into, and that was like, here it comes. And then it never came, so stuff like that. It's like it's heartbreaking in the moment, but at some point during the editing or whatever, it just didn't make sense to put it in there, and I understood that later, really, that, it's about the final output. It's about the sort of final product. And so, it's about understanding that you're in this collaborative mix. You're not a single individual trying to express your artistic integrity or whatever. Perhaps that's what personal projects are more about, right? Where you have this full control, or you feel like you really want to express yourself in a way that isn't possible within the client constraints.
And on the flip side, let's say you are faced in a negative situation where everything that's coming at you is either completely negative, whether it's directly from like feedback or just the whole environment in general. What tools do you tap into? What techniques do you tap into to ensure that you still can produce the best work that you can produce?
Yeah, I've been there too, man. I think sometimes you got to sit there and sweat a little bit, and you have to maybe swallow your pride a little bit and just keep moving forward, you know. Again, I think it's about trying not to take it personally, even if it's hurtful, which sucks, but it's you know, there's definitely been moments in my career where I feel like myself and the client haven't seen eye to eye, perhaps, or maybe even just for whatever reason, the creative direction wasn't what I subjectively wanted it to be, or, you know, maybe I didn't quite understand what the objective was. Maybe there's too much separation between myself and the client. Sometimes with vendors, you know, that happens. But I do think that it's just about, you know, getting through it and being honest and open about where you feel you are, and not trying to sugarcoat it, but keep an open conversation between you and whoever is sort of controlling the art direction. And then, you know, in the future, keep an open mind about whether or not you want to continue that relationship, working together and so on. Like, I think you see it a lot in features and in entertainment design, where it's the same, you know, group of people sort of doing the same type of work over and over again, or working together a lot on different projects. And it's because there's this inherent trust. There's a social contract there that they've all understood. And, you know, you sort of don't have to worry about, oh, is this person going to be a prima donna, or is this person going to be hard to work with, or flaky or slow or whatever, you know. Once that's set, you just want to make the art, and you want to make the best thing that you can make, right? So it's about not worrying about the people aspect and having that trust. But then you also benefit from that. You benefit from being in a group of people like that, because you're able to just move fast and express yourself in ways that maybe you can take more risks, because the trust is there, right? So there's not this sort of blowback if it doesn't exactly work out.
And with the teams that you work in, like, how big and small can they get? I assume that there are probably instances where it's just yourself and maybe a couple of other people, to, like you mentioned, a whole production unit, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've worked on shows where it was just, you know, a 1 degree separation from myself and a visual effects supervisor. And at that point, it's very, you know, they're the ones speaking to the director, and then they communicate the concepts to me. And obviously they have an idea of what they want the effects to feel and look like as well, and how everything's integrating. And then there's, you know, where you're part of a larger crew. Maybe you're working for a vendor or a studio. So there's a number of artists, and you have dailies with, either the studio or a representative from the studio, or maybe you're working together with a number of different shops as well, right? There's like, you know, different vendors get different shots. So there's relationships there as well. So you have to sort of all be aware of a little bit, like, generally how the work is looking and how things are being done. So yeah, it varies from project to project. I think they're both valuable experiences, and there's something to be learned from either. I think you know, I do miss, you know, the post-COVID days. I do miss sitting in a studio sometimes and leaning over and being like, "Oh, that's cool. How are you doing that?" Or, you know, what are you working on? Like, you sort of get this really easy spontaneity, you know, and that's harder to do in the remote world. So it gets more difficult in that sense. But, remote has also been very convenient and very, has freed me up in a lot of ways as well. I can sit here in Paris and work internationally on various projects, and super fortunate to do that. So I'm grateful and feel privileged to do so.
And pre-COVID, was it still remote, or was it like a mixture, or were you constantly moving location to location?
It was a mix. I was living in the US for a long time too, so I used to fly down to LA a lot to kind of sit in a studio or sit with people and work. And again, those are fantastic experiences because you build relationships with people and studios and such. So it was a mix, and then I would just work remotely or freelance from my home at the time. But the last four or 5 years, probably been doing a mix of both, but mostly just remote from home. Yeah.
It's weird how it's like almost half a decade has passed. It still feels like it was a recent thing, and just trying to get used to that kind of new normal, as they used to say as well.
I know.
Yeah, it's crazy. How do you see it going now? Like, do you see it staying, at least for yourself and the clients you're working with? Is it mainly going to be the setup they have now, or do you see it kind of going back to pre-COVID, or is it going to be like a complete? It depends on, I guess, client to client.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll always have a home set up. I've flirted with the idea of having a separate studio somewhere, renting space from time to time, but I'm a very obsessive person, and I'm always working on like 5-6 things at once. So, on my own time, obviously, and it's like, in various states of completion. Like I'm writing over here and doing storyboards over here, and then essentially my day job obviously takes up most of my time. But I like being able to have a very comfortable setup here at home and just come in. I'm lucky enough to have a separate room for our office, so come in here and set up, and I'm able to do the work that I need to do without a commute or anything like that. So, even if I rented space, it would still probably just be me, me and my dog or something in a room. So it wouldn't be that different. I'm kind of protective of my creative space, I think. But I like visiting studios and seeing the sort of creative vibe that they have, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think more of the same, honestly. Yeah.
Your creative space. So I'm kind of not there yet, where I'm working towards getting dedicated, just like a room. Hopefully I have a bodyguard outside so no one gets in or anything, and I can just be by myself. I've kind of like, I got a corner of a room where it's kind of like my own thing. But how long has it taken you to kind of like create your workspace, and when did you know, like, what do you expect of your workspace? Like, how did you, like, do you have to go for like certain vibes or a certain thing, like, or if it is based on equipment?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through a number of things. Like, I definitely wasn't always working in the way that I am now. I got my start like with computers and art doing rave flyers back in the day. So I had a little computer. I was doing a lot of music at the time. So, it was like bedroom studio with a computer, and your bed, you roll out of bed and you're there, kind of thing. And I think in some ways, sometimes that's just going to be your life, and that's fine. But if you're able to separate the two, I think it's pretty important. I've had, at my old place in the States, I think I had a pretty sweet studio set up with a separate room. Now here in Paris, the places aren't as big. So obviously, my wife and I share this studio space or this room. And even it feels a little cluttered now, even just from like my things piling up and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to having, a dedicated space that's just like very much mine. And yeah, it's about curating it. I like clean. I like uncluttered. I like having art up on the wall. I don't know if you can see this piece here, but it's from Akira.
Yes.
It's one of the solenoid prints. So stuff like that I can look up at and feel inspired. That's like timeless, and a little bit of greenery, little plants and stuff on your desk, and get a standing desk and a good chair, and invest in the things that you're gonna spend a lot of time on or in or near. So that takes time, takes time to pay for expensive things. And, for a long time, it's like, I've worked a million, different jobs as well before art. I've been in a lot of kitchens. I drove a truck delivering TVs.
Sick.
I've done a lot of things, and so I feel very privileged to be in this position, making art for a living, and having the ability to create a space for myself to be artistic. Yeah. So
I'd love to know a little bit more about that. Like, similar to myself, before I became a concept artist, a lot of the time was whilst I was working towards being one, I was working similar jobs too, and almost thinking, when is it going to happen or whatever, and doing all these jobs, recognizing that I don't want to be doing this job for a long time. But then after time, looking back on those jobs and thinking, oh, okay, I would not have learned that if I had not done that job. So do you have the similar experience? Like, what are the highlights of some of those, I guess, pre-creative jobs where it has kind of like given you something that you almost use in your creative life?
Yeah, for me, a lot of it is like the motivation is really strong to move on to something else when you're in a place where you're sort of not satisfied, right? So that's a strong motivator for sure. This idea that it's not good enough, or you're not where you don't feel like you're in the place where your potential is being, brought to the center, or being, your potential is being fulfilled, right? So yeah, that's a lesson. I do feel like I've always had these like moments where, working retail or working in restaurants, and where the drive to get out of that situation and move towards something that was based around art was strong. And I do think a lot of that comes out in just discipline of taking risks, making opportunities for yourself. And a lot of that, I think, is why I think that mentality is sort of also why I am so passionate about personal projects, because it used to be in my career that it was very much about, brands and sort of the IPs and look at what I've worked on and that kind of stuff. And to a degree, it still is, maybe. But the things that I truly am the most passionate about, or the things that I see like really are reflecting myself the most, at least at times, are personal projects that I put up that really also helped me get to the work that I wanted to. It's about kind of, you don't always want to do say, like I'm thinking back here, is what I'm saying. Like, when I was in sort of the agency studio land, at times, you get a client and, it's like a beer or, what I call dancing Dorito bags. Like, someone's got to do that work, and I've done a lot of that work. But in the end, it's like it doesn't really feel like the reflection of who I wanted to be or what I thought I had to say as an artist, or as a designer. So what I did in my spare time, you're essentially working two jobs, whether you're working in a kitchen or you're doing retail or whatever, man, you're just going to have to come home and find the time, whether it's in the morning or into night or whatever, and make work that speaks to you and attracts the sort of work that you're trying to get paid for. Mm-hmm. And you put that front and center, even if it's only one thing in your portfolio, that's the thing you put up there. Mm. And then someone else, the person that's going to vibe with that or be attracted to that type of work, those are the kind of people that you want to work for, because there's an energy there. There's a common language there. But if you just put the work of your jumping potato chip bag on your site, that's the kind of work that you're going to get, and you're going to get more of that stuff, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, pay the bills, hell yeah. But if you feel the need to progress as an artist or as a designer or whatever, then you have to sort of make a deal with yourself to find the time to really create these special projects that really show what you can do and who you are, I think, artistically.
And is that something that you have always done since you began? Or is that something you kind of like had to come to the realization of and kind of like come up with a strategy thinking, how do I get what I want to do? And then you saw that avenue was personal work.
That's 100% how I got into working in film. Because I had some things that were professionally done that were sort of in the wheelhouse, but nothing like the things that I was admiring at the time. So yeah, I just came up with my own brief and my own short story, and started learning different tools, and again, in the end, made like a little, I guess just like a little short, like a little vignette of a bunch of stuff. And that kind of blew up and got me a lot of attention. And then, clients start calling. Like, it sounds simple, but it's a lot of hard work. And there was a lot of failure along the way as well. Like, the project was huge in scope and beyond my abilities at the time. And sometimes, you start a project and you realize that the learning curve is so high that you have to put it on pause, and you can pick it up years later when you have a better pipeline, a better workflow, and you sort of understand how you're trying to achieve things more accurately. But yeah, I'm a project-based learning kind of guy. So if I need to learn a tool, it's always within the sort of constraints or within the context of a project. I don't just go like, ooh, this tool is cool, let me learn all the hotkeys and all the plugins and all the stuff. Because eventually you just, you can do 1,000 tutorials, but if you're not cherry picking the things out of those tutorials to apply to your own stylistic work, then you're just going to end up with the same spinning shiny ball that everyone else is able to do. Then you're just like a button pusher, right? It's about having your vision, your own vision, and then within the context or the constraints of that vision, you hit a roadblock, like, oh, how do I solve this particular thing. Like, how do I get it to do this and then go to this? Okay, well, maybe I've seen examples of something else that sort of did something similar. And then you find a tutorial on that, and you find that little nugget of information that solves that particular issue. And then maybe you learn the software just good enough to like solve that issue, get your output, get it looking how you want it, and then move on. And it's like blank slate, next.
Yes.
Like I know a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of stored hotkeys and tools and technical things in my brain, but man, cognitive load, dude, it's real. Like,
yes,
you can't know every single thing all the time. Like, do what you need to do to solve the problem at hand, and then move on.
So is that like how you approach tools in general? Get to where you need to get the result, and then move to the next thing?
Yeah, not always. Sometimes it's really fun to experiment too. I think for me, like ZBrush, for example, I think is super fun. Like just sitting down and just experimenting and just making mistakes, and you can move really fast. And I really love ZBrush. It's such an interesting, entertaining. It's really, for me, the closest expression to drawing in 3D that I've found. And I know Blender's sculpting tools are quite good too, but I'm just like, I know how to use ZBrush, so I just stick with it, kind of thing. And I'm a big like monster creature guy too, so I love all that kind of work coming out of the ZBrush community. And so I studied for a while and took some classes, and learning about anatomy and learning about all these things. And there's always something to be learned from other industries that may not align with yours, but I use some of those principles even in my course, for example, of like primary shapes, secondary shapes, tertiary shapes. That stuff I learned from sculpting, like that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, that applies to everything. It applies to graphic design. It applies to whatever you're making. So there's always ways to learn things that cross over into other disciplines. So yeah, I would say there's leave room for experimentation if something is fun. I've dabbled in some simulation stuff, but I don't enjoy Sims too much. It's a little too programmatic for me. I quite like CAD as well. So I got really heavy into Moy and some plasticity now, but I haven't had a ton of need for it really. So again, this is the thing, like if the project that I'm doing has a lot of like, let's say it has a lot of hard surface work that needs to be done, then I'll do a deep dive and learn the tool. And the more you do it, the more you sort of understand how to learn. It's not just like learning, it's sort of you understand how to put yourself in the mindset of learning something new, because the pressure of like having to know it all and to be an expert isn't there anymore. It's just all about solving the thing that's in front of you. So it's like, it kind of is a nice way to approach a big sort of very intimidating piece of software, like Houdini, for example. Like if I needed like a little certain simulation, I would just figure out a very basic way to get there, and then I would move on. But so kind of a bit of both, I would say.
And regarding software itself, I've had a similar experience, at least when you mentioned like your early stages, like trying to like learn tools and especially 3D. My first introduction to 3D, well, I did transport design. That was my pathway into the industry.
Cool. Sick.
So it was like Alias, which That's another thing that still gives me PTSD, like just the nerve surfacing. Although I kind of get it now a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it switched to
Nerves,
Maya.
then.
Then it switched to Maya, and then like all these other tools came about, and I think I've tried almost all of them. I've also got lost in a lot of them as well. Early on, when I was naive, I always thought that was like, oh, this is what the industry requires, so I must learn this. But then when I tried something else, which actually spoke more to where my brain works, I immediately got better results in that. So from yourself, like, how do you know when a software clicks for you? Like, do you have like certain, I guess, milestones you're looking for where you think, okay, yeah, this is going to be for me? And equally, when you realize, okay, this is not going to be for me for whatever reason, might be because it's taking too long to learn it, or it's not going to get the result versus the time it takes. Like, do you have like a certain way of like figuring out packages and techniques and workflows?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I think there's just to touch on the industry standard thing a little bit too. Like, I can think of certain times in my career where I've sat down at a studio and you sort of, got my way in there, and then they're like, okay, now do the thing, and just like sweating, like, oh, I'll figure this out, and so there's some like on the job learning, I think. And I think if you're with the right studio, or if I think a lot of people who are in the creative industry recognize that the tools are somewhat secondary to a person who can express something creatively, or be like a storyteller, or able to solve problems and conceptualize at a high level. You can teach tools, it's much harder to teach how to come up with solutions, creative solutions, especially visual ones, and ones that will entertain, but also sort of, at least in my world, sort of function in a way, right? Like form follows function sort of thing. But I do think, eventually there's a subset of tools that I come back to over and over and over again. And that changes, and that's the way of the world, new pieces of software come out that make the thing that you were really good at obsolete, or one click away sort of thing, and man, you just got to get over it and move on. That's
Yeah.
the world. Like, I get super stoked when I see just like, like some 13-year-old just crushing it because they've been using, all the cool tools since they were like 8 or 7 or whatever. And that's rad. I think that's just like a really cool, like, progression. That's the future, and we should all support that. And, it'd be the same if we were there. It's just the tools were readily available, like I was saying. I was in school when Maya came out, and it was like this insane, it was like buying an island, like if you wanted to buy Maya, it was so unattainable to anybody. And it was just like, okay, how do we like find this, how do we like, which bay do you have to, drive your little pirate ship into to get this one. But nowadays, their business expenses, and I take it as part of the job. But it's always about learning new tools and to keeping fresh. And you don't have to learn everything. There's so much out there. There's always something new. But there's also a lot to be said about fundamentals. And there's nothing wrong with pen and paper and learning about form and shape and light and composition, all those things. Those things you don't need a computer for. There's tons of resources out there. There's more resources now than ever before at the click of a button. So I think in that way, you can learn things that you don't need some expensive piece of software for. And again, I think people that are out there hiring for someone maybe starting out or whatever, they recognize that aspect. Like they can see if someone's work is trying to apply those fundamental things, and to them, that's more of a valuable candidate, someone that they can teach these tools to, than someone that's like, look at my super refined render, because it's like, that's cool and all, but the tools have been so democratized that like it's not that hard now to get that look, right? So in a way, in my brain, I tend to almost drift more stylistically in all my stuff, all my personal work even too, because I just feel like the imperfections and the sort of, subjectively too, it's what I enjoy more maybe, but I do feel like it's just like, feels like more like me, like it feels more like me, like sketching on a piece of paper, and I always start out on paper for a lot of the problem solving stuff as well. Like, as you can see in my course, like it's all about drawing and sketching and solving that stuff first before going anywhere near a computer,
Yeah, that's what I love about the course. So for anyone's listening now, Mastering Film UI is available now to purchase. If you're signing up when this episode airs, it should be on a massive early bird discount, so now's a great time to get it. And obviously I'm looking at this course more from like hard surface industrial design type angle, and whenever I look at like anything UI or HUD stuff, I always have a level of intimidation because it's, at least my mind, quite a departure from what I do. However, like you mentioned before, the way you approach making a product, like, is project based, like you said. So straight away I understood that language, and the way everything's done for purpose, and obviously a vehicle's involved in this as well. So that was music to my ears and my eyes as well. So that made complete sense. And it definitely started triggering ideas of like, okay, so I can deploy this in this way. And equally for those who haven't got a design that they want to implement this on, you provide obviously plates and templates that people can use as well. But yes, taking all that, we'll get to the course in detail in a moment. But yes, I love how it all starts off with pen sketch, and that's where it all starts as well. Yeah,
thanks. It was about setting the stage for the UI itself, and I needed to sort of replicate usually something that's given to me, and I add to it. But if not, it would have just kind of been UI elements free floating, and there's ways to make that look cool as well, but I really wanted to try to replicate a set piece, and so the technology for me, UI design is not just about the UI, it's about the technology behind it. If you think about like what's the OS, or what's the actual tech behind it, and why is it made the way it is, and how do users interact with it, and that will tell you a lot about how it should be designed and how it should express itself, right? So it's about taking that extra time to think about those things, and that will just make your design feel more grounded and more believable, even if it's fantastic and you're making a lot of times these very fictional concepts for very out there science fiction movies or shows or games. Sometimes it's supposed to be more grounded and real world, or slightly future forward or what have you. But it's about taking that extra time to really understand how things work. And so I designed some tech around it, this sort of holographic projector that has this spinning piece on it, and integrated into the car, and the various screens that sort of correspond to that and give feedback but also I wanted to sort of communicate that sometimes in at least in the UI world, there's sometimes a hero element that is, right, like in the middle of the screen, and it tells a story and it has a function within the larger narrative of the show. And sometimes it's like, there's actors interacting with it and stuff. And then other times you have, your sort of, good looking nonsense like Blinky Bits in the back. And regardless of the sort of prominence, everything should be considered with the same level of care and the same level of quality and excellence. Everything should feel like, if you decided to zoom in on this thing that's in the background, it's going to look just as cool as the thing that you're working on over here. So you want to bring everything up equally, and I think that's something that's quite important. Just because it's in the background or it's secondary doesn't mean you can kind of just like pretend like it's something good,
And another key thing that really stood out to me is, and it's something that you obviously, like, it's almost like your mantra, so to speak, like story first, right? Like story's at the heart of everything. And in the course, you begin with a script. And is that something, again, for those students who are completely new, how close is this to what it's like on the job in the real world setting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies. Sometimes you'll be in really early in the process, pre-production, sort of helping and tell, like, sort of create a vision of what things could be like. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you'll have a script. It sort of depends on the production. It depends on the director and how much they care about the aspects. And then other times you'll just get a plate and you'll have a specific instruction on what something should be doing. And then it's up to you to design, and either maybe there's already an existing shape language that's been created. Maybe if it's a franchise, like a Marvel show, you have to adhere to what's been done previously. And definitely with like something like a Star Wars or whatever, you're dealing with a huge IP that has very specific shape language rules. And it's, in that case, it's not really about showing everybody who you are. It's about contributing to the bigger picture, like I said before. But in this case, I wanted to show a little bit about how story really impacts what you're trying to achieve with the visual, and how you set sort of constraints for yourself has a lot of impact and can be very useful. And you sort of create narrative structure, and you create some world building type rules around where does this stuff exist, what's the general sort of level of technology within this world, all those kind of things. And really, for me, that's a lot of fun too. Mm-hmm. So I have, I wanted to have fun making it as well, right? So it's really, again, like you said, I start with the story, and for me, it's not just like a guilty pleasure, but it is also very helpful in making something that feels together, regardless of what I'm building. It's like you can always go back to that foundation and be like, oh, how does this fit? Does this work in this world? Does this work within this set of rules that I've made for myself? Does it express the pillars that I set, or does it echo or reflect the keywords that I came up with, or does it match my my visual references, et cetera, right? So you're creating these ground rules for yourself to make sure that the end product looks cohesive and looks like it was made by one maker, kind of thing. Yeah.
And when you are looking at a script, because scripts are typically not light, but they don't have much detail in them, especially from a visual aspect, from a designer's aspect. It's not like, yes, it's X centimeters wide and it's powered by this, etc. And obviously you got to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Is that something you enjoy when you get something that's like almost has a lot of empty spaces or blanks that you need to fill?
Yeah.
Or do you prefer more detail?
Yeah. I mean, I think at that point it becomes, it's about a discourse, and it's about a back and forth. And, when it's blue sky, it can be really fun. And it also can be very intimidating. But then, it's more about how far do you take things. You imply structure, you imply motion. If you're talking about pre-production and you're trying to like interpret a thing spins in a room, something super vague, then it's not about solving every little motion piece. It's not about solving every transition and making everything look cool. And I would say that's more reflected in that, that early Photoshop lesson, where it's about trying to just move fast and think about the concepts, and it's about sort of keeping those concepts in the back of your mind for later, but trying to express them in a brushstroke or kind of and a thing that's visually, if you squint your eyes, you can kind of imagine it, But I think it's important to remember that as artists and as designers, like not everyone thinks visually, and you have to be able to also communicate your ideas alongside your designs, right? So you can't just hand someone a PDF and then be like, get it, because it never works. That almost never works that way, right? Like, depending on the fidelity of your art, I guess. But usually you want to have some kind of explanation along, like, and I think that goes along with your designs, and I think that goes a long way, because it shows people that are trying to invest in your ideas that you have also done the legwork to get to something. You're not just trying to show them like a pretty picture or like a cool looking thing. You've done some like thinking behind it. It's about solving problems, right?
And when you're speaking or communicating with someone who's not a visual thinker, how do you broach that? Like, how do you, I guess like you're translating, right? Like having a translator between these two different languages. How do you use specific techniques or a specific process to kind of get to the answer? Or is it purely based on the individual and you take it from there?
Yeah, I would say it's probably it's an individual thing, but yeah, I guess it's a little bit of that, again, explaining to your mom what you do for a living kind of thing. You have to speak in terms that maybe you feel like maybe are simplifying things, but really it's about expressing them in ways that are, sort of understandable to everyone, to someone perhaps that isn't that interested in what you're trying to say. And they're more interested in, like, they're thinking about 1,000 other things, right? And especially with UI, like sometimes you're sort of way down the ladder of importance. You have directors that care a lot about it, and that's reflected in the things that they eventually show up on screen, and then you have ones that kind of just see it as a prop and they want to move the story forward. As long as it does the job, then they're like, fine, make whatever you want. I trust the people that I put in place to make it look good. But they care more about the story and like how are the actors and what's the narrative doing, right? So as long as it doesn't get in the way of that. So maybe, you know, when you're presenting your work, being able to communicate how this thing that you're coming up with is sort of contributing to the story or solving a particular problem or adding to the, you know, to the feeling or the emotional resonance of the show. And so it becomes a little bit about understanding who you're working with, I think, whether or not they want to dive into detail. Like some people are really, you know, really interested in it and they want to know all about like, oh man, what's the tech and how does this work and all this kind of stuff. And that's super fun. And then others just care more about, you know, bigger picture stuff, and that's fine. And so you have to be open to both, and you have to understand how to sort of pivot and communicate either one, you know. And so, yeah, if you think about it with story, and if you think about it from a functional perspective, you're sort of able to do both.
From your perspective, what do you prefer? Like, how far down the rabbit hole do you go of figuring out, like, you know, where these things are designed and how they work and all of that kind of stuff?
I think it's all based on time, man. Like,
right.
You don't usually have all this free time to dream and come up with all kinds of things. I think maybe in gaming a bit more, because the timelines, especially on AAA games, like you have all this pre-production time and blue sky stuff. And if that's what you're hired to do, you know, I've worked on some games where they're just trying to come up with like, what does this even look like? And we have this like concept of this thing, and what is that? What does it even do or feel like? And so then you get the dream. But if you're like way down the road on a production and you have this many weeks to do these shots, then yeah, you got to think on your toes and you got to solve the problems quickly. And yeah, it's definitely depends on the production. I think I enjoy both, honestly. I get a lot of joy out of dreaming about or conceptualizing how things work and you know, that kind of stuff. But I also get a lot of joy out of contributing to a bigger thing. You know, that's more about executing on a shot or something. It's really fun as well.
One thing I like about the course is you get given plates. So almost you can treat it like a live, I guess, real world situation where I guess the universe and the look is already set, because you got these scenes and you got these shots that are kind of waiting for you to do your magic. And by you, I mean obviously the students that are listening and definitely taking this course right now, which I find super cool. Like I definitely want to tackle that just as an exercise. Already I have like my own designs I want to build to do my own little thing, which is fine as well, but that's cool, my own personal thing. But also just as a challenge, I definitely want to give it a try of like with these forms, how to basically make them sing with the UI and everything. How common is that, like, to get plates? Because you're given the example in the course of, I think, is the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where it's the arm thing where they're giving you a blank plate. Yeah, is that quite a common occurrence, especially in films?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think I made it a little easy because these are plates that are static. You know, the camera's not moving. I think in the little short that I made out of all the sequences at the end, I'm moving the camera around just on a static plate to create some movement. But yeah, usually, you know, you're tracking, well, you might be working with a visual effects artist as well that's doing all the tracking and doing all that stuff, but you have to compensate for those kind of things, and you have to really understand timing for one, because it's sometimes things are just there and gone, you know, so you don't have time to, you think this transition that you're building is like super cool and look at it unfold, and then you put it into the plate and it's like there's no time for any of that stuff, you know. So you need to understand your position within the larger production. So I think plates are very common, but also in this case, I wanted to make it a little simpler, just having static things that you could comp your stuff into, and you know, hopefully add to whatever narrative that you're trying to create, but also give you something cool to just add your designs to. You know, even if, like I said in the intro video, I think, or one of the lessons, you know, go ahead and paint over them or change them around or do whatever. That's cool, you know, make it yours.
I like that about the course as well, like that approach, because it happens quite frequently, and it's normally when you've reached a point where something needs to be figured out or it's not particularly working, you can just go back in, change it, adjust it, tweak it, and that's something that you're doing throughout the entirety of the whole course, where you're like constantly seeing either new areas of opportunity or things that don't work.
It's a journey.
Is that something that you do almost in anything?
Yeah, I think you have to be open to change in that way. Again, I think within a production, there's not as much time. So you have to be open to notes and to critique and to really understand. Like, I think if you build stuff with a sort of not compartmentalized, but more of a modular approach, then you're able to change and move things around more easily once you know, feedback comes in, like, oh, make this thing over here like twice as big and move this over here. And if everything's sort of like merged together, it's harder to do. So if you're able to sort of think about things more in like modules and how things sort of fit together, then it's way easier down the road to pivot and change. I think it comes down to time sometimes, to how much you have, how much bandwidth you have to solve that kind of thing.
I also like how when you get to Illustrator and you're building out all the elements and the assets, I think is the bit where you like designing the speedometer, and then you're trying to figure that out. Also seeing, because obviously it's in a vehicle, like how that performs and like going back and forth, and it's quite cool seeing a thought process. Obviously you're narrating it as well, which definitely helped us see the thought process, but designing through motion as well, which I thought was very intuitive. Like I always found that a little bit intimidating. I've always kind of like put that to one side, thinking I need to get to this level before I get there. But the way you approach that made me feel like, okay, I can do this as I'm figuring things out. In that situation though, let's say it is in a tight deadline or there's something that needs to be figured out. How easy is it from that point to like kind of, I guess, kick out some renders and send it off to an art director or someone else in the pipeline? Do you do that often? Like, do you just send like snapshots of where the project's at to kind of get answers? Yeah,
there's almost always dailies, and there's almost always, you know, feedback, you know, on a daily basis, essentially. And, you know, sometimes for me, the difference in time zones, because I work with a lot of US clients, at least in the past, is, you know, I get to work all day and then, you know, upload dailies, and then I have notes in the morning, you know, so that kind of thing. Or I have a call late in the day and then notes in the morning. So in that sense, there's always feedback. It's really, it's a cadence, you know, it's a journey. You have to be open to the sort of, I think when you consider motion initially, and I talk about this a lot in the course about thinking about things mid-motion, You don't get locked into a static design and you're thinking about it like, again, this is like sort of a narrative approach, I think. So there's a sort of a structure that you can follow when you're writing, say like an action scene or something like that, where you don't necessarily want to start before the action or after. You want to start sort of like in the middle of the thing, and just so you give the audience some kind of like inkling of like, oh, where is he coming from and where is he going, right? And it's the same with this kind of thing where you want to have an idea of the before and the after, and you're sort of trying to find the middle. And by doing that, I think you give yourself breathing room, and you automatically consider all the things that you're building. And then it becomes about, it becomes a little bit about testing things out. I think you get to a point where you want to kind of try it out and see, does this work the way I had imagined it? Because, doing a quick little prototype has a lot of value, give it a few keyframes, test something out. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then go back to the drawing table and try it a different way. But you can kind of picture it moving all you want, but until it's actually doing the thing that you intended it to do, then you're sort of a little bit in the dark,
Another cool aspect is, it's probably like a little small thing, but it's something that I enjoyed, is in After Effects, obviously, which is the phase when you're animating it, there's very few plugins involved. Normally, I see a lot of things like, okay, there's so many plugins, and I look at the price and thinking, okay, this is even more expensive. I'll definitely put it on the back burner. But these are almost tools that just kind of like streamline things a little bit, help you jump from one package to another, and the rest is just pure theory and feel and workflow. Yeah,
well, I mean, maybe it says a little about me. I'm not an expert, I find the things that help me achieve the look and feel that I want, and then I don't need anything beyond that. I'm open to learning a new tool if it's like, pivotal or important in order for me to get a certain look or whatever. But and again, I wanted this class to feel approachable. There's a few plugins I think in there that I value really highly, that I constantly use, like Flow and Overlord, for example. They're just amazing tools that just make things easier, especially Overlord, like just, back in the day, like copy pasting shapes from Illustrator into After Effects. It was like, that's how I did one of my really early projects too. It was just like copy paste, and now it's like click and it's all like perfect. So I love that stuff, so how could you not? It just saves you so much time. And I know there's tons of plugins and workflow things that I don't particularly use. And sometimes I'm like a stubborn old goat and I just want to do it my way. And that's fine. That's my personal preference. And I definitely am not, sponsored by any of those plugins. It's just like, here's how I work, so.
And equally for those who are still trying to figure out their workflow and their process, I mean, this is just to clarify, this is something that you still use on like live projects and on these big projects.
Oh yeah,
like
100%.
Have you ever been encountered a situation where you've been like kind of, not to be dramatic, but commanded to use a particular workflow, or as long as you can deliver what you need to deliver?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's been part of my experience, working at studios and stuff. Sometimes you have to request certain tools, and sometimes you have to sit down and work with what they have. And, I think it's just being honest about like, hey, I'm trying to achieve this. If we had this in-house, then I could do this a lot faster and a lot better for you. And then sometimes, yeah, it's about sweating bullets and getting it done, and learning, like tapping someone on the shoulder if you're in a studio environment like that. But yeah, I think that's why a lot of freelancers like having their own setup, because you're comfortable. And I tell clients that a lot too. It's like, if you want the type of work that you're hiring me for, that you see in my portfolio or whatever, that's done on this home setup, and I'm going to be able to execute in that way for you and give you more value if you let me use my own tools. So, that's something to consider if you're being pressured to work in-house. Sometimes, it used to be, and it still is, I think, it's because of an IP, and people are, companies are very afraid of leaks, and there's legal issues to leaks, and there's a lot of money on the line. So you have to connect into another computer, or like remotely connect in, or have some kind of like firewalls and things like that, or go there physically. So there's other aspects that I understand why you would have to work on a local machine. But yeah, most of the time it's about the work, and if I can communicate the fact that it's going to be better and faster on my own machine, then it's one way to do it.
And the favorite part of my course is actually the end, not because it's over, but because of how you package and present. And it goes a little bit deeper than normally, like, here's the finished product, put it out there, and that will be enough. Like, that's fine, it looks great. But you go that extra mile, cook up a trailer, package it in a particular way, almost see what needs to be cut and let it be cut as well. But back to your analogy, was it Black Panther when you worked on that? Like, be like almost brutal with your own project, where you can see that, okay, I love it, but it doesn't work, or whatever the reason is, you can do that as well. Why do you go to that length?
I think for presentation, it's important. Someone can sit down and digest all your work in a sitting, versus like flipping through a bunch of images, or watching just like rotating HUD pieces or whatever. But I do think it adds to the story. It adds to the narrative. It gives you a way to sort of add an additional layer, I think, of story. I really enjoy the editing process as well. I really enjoy creating a rhythm, and it's another aspect of animation and motion that I think, until I started putting together clips like that, I didn't really understand. And I really enjoy that rhythm. It's like making music,
Yes,
So I think there's a lot of joy to be had there, honestly. And adding in audio and doing that stuff, and it's about taking pride in your work and really giving it the stage that it's supposed to have in order for it to be presented in the way that you want. So not everything needs that, but for me, it was important to show an additional layer in that way with this particular project.
Yeah, I think that's what's great about the course in its entirety as well. Like, whether you need that in every project or not, obviously that will depend on the project, but you can either be found in a situation where you can use almost every chapter and use it to advantage, or whether it's like this element or that element, that will be enough and you can still use that. But with the course, obviously you've gained all the knowledge that you need to do that. But from your perspective, what would you like? And obviously students come in all shapes and sizes, whether they're experienced and want to brush up on their skills, completely new, or switching from one discipline to another. What would you say is the approach they need to bring, or the mindset, or just maybe even skill set that they should have or is best to have before they embark on the course?
I guess approach it with an open mind. And I think one thing that I stress about the course is that it's not about, just copying every technique and trying to replicate everything. I think it's about really noticing the things that you are that you find could be helpful. Like even if you just get one technique or one sort of thing from the course, I think it's valuable. That's always been my approach. And you take that nugget and you inject it into your own workflow or your own approach. And it becomes, something valuable that you retain. It becomes really about your own output and not so much about having the tutorial represent you, right? So approaching it, it's a lot of stuff. I think I really wanted it to just be an expression of how I work and the projects that I am a part of. I would just maybe maintain an open mind and don't worry so much about redoing or doing every single aspect. Just find the parts that you're the most interested in and the things that speak to you the most and try to incorporate those into your own workflow, and then you're going to end up with work that looks and feels like your own style, your own voice.
Amazingly put. I have one final, I guess, question/topic before we wrap up. I want to ask you about your personal projects. You got some incredible personal projects. Thanks. And whether it's even some of the client ones as well. And what I'm getting at is more, I can see after watching the course as well, like your DNA of how you approach a project and like the story first aspect. Like it's not just a tagline, it's genuinely true and you see it in everything. I particularly enjoy how detailed you go in thinking about how things work. And like, for example, I think it's in your parallel project where you got that circular keyboard, spherical keyboard. Yeah. And then all that, I was like, yes. I nerded it out over just the explanation of that alone, let alone just the presentation. And you see that in every single project and even the short films as well. I just want to get in more like about, I guess, like how, whether someone's using the course for personal projects or for client stuff, but let's say it's just purely personal projects. Like, just to recap again, like, why do you invest so much time and energy into personal projects? Because if you're like being, I guess, I don't know, like into entrepreneurial about it, you get little back, right? Like, it's not much like money that comes back into it. Yeah. So why would you, and why do you put so much effort and clearly a lot of yourself into your personal projects?
Well, I think it's always been the goal, it was to make my own art and to tell my own stories and that kind of thing. And, the sort of the path that I've taken has been to try to bring the thing that makes money closer and closer and closer and closer to the thing that I dream about at night and the stories that I come up on my own time. And I honestly feel like it's pretty damn close at this point, but it's been a long journey. And each personal project, I think, also represents a new set of challenges that I always try to one-up myself, and I always try to make something that's either has a larger scope or has a more mature sort of approach, whether that's story or my emotional connection to it and how it represents my influences and sort of my past and all those kind of things. And understanding yourself more, I think, feeds into the next version of what you're trying to create. I think, like I said, it's always been the end goal was to make all my own stuff. And I'm super privileged and very fortunate to be able to do the work that I do for clients and for others, and be able to retain a lot of my artistic individuality doing so. But I think some of that comes from really staying true to my own voice and expressing that through these personal projects and showing like, hey, look, this is my style. And I think pulling in again those people that are really attracted to that will only pay off in the long run, right? You're gonna get clients that are gonna be like, oh, we want that on our thing, right? And so then you're like inching closer and closer and closer to where the two are sort of just a blur, right? But yeah, it becomes about personal challenge, and I'm working on several things at the moment as well, and it's becoming more like year-long things versus months now. So yeah, but it's all within respect of taking care of other, paying gigs and paying work, and a lot of my time is spent with Parallel these days. So, and it's super fun work. So I'm happy with that as well.
Awesome, Chris. Looking forward to seeing the projects. Looking forward to seeing the students.
Thank you.
What they do on the course, and thanks so much for chatting.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the talk, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. A massive thanks to Chris for an incredible and inspiring conversation. Mastering Film UI is available now, and if you're listening to this as soon as it airs, then you can get a massive 50% off early bird discount. The first lesson is free too, so you can try the course before you buy. Hit the links attached to sign up, and also to give Chris a follow and see what he's up to. I've been host Aaron Danda. Till next time.
Learn to design and animate incredible film-ready UI for your next project. Instructor KRIS Brady has utilized his 20 years of industry experience to create this comprehensive course, sharing his secrets to every stage of the process. When you're working on UI design, you're not doing it in a vacuum. You're serving a larger story and setting. That's why this course is built from the ground up to simulate the experience of working on an actual high-budget film production. You'll receive art department assets like 3D models, plans, and environment renders, helping your ideas to truly complement the setting. Chris will take you through his entire workflow, from the earliest rough sketches to primary, secondary, and tertiary designs, and finally to full-on animation. And on top of all that, Chris will provide you with 11 fully rendered high-quality CG plates. These production-level shots can be used as backgrounds for your own interfaces, without needing to go out and photograph, film, or create them for yourself. With all these supporting assets in place, you can focus entirely on design and animation, without wasting time anywhere else. With beginner-level theories and tools, all the way up to the most advanced film UI concepts, anyone can take this course and improve their skills, no matter their previous level of experience. Sign up today and begin your journey at learnsquared.com.